part of our great privilege is to walk with people through big moments in life. And on one end it would be a celebration at a wedding, something like that. And at the other end would be the grief of losing someone we love and their funeral. And those kind of on both ends of the spectrum. But over decades of pastoral ministry, there are probably some interesting situations you've been in. So what about maybe the most difficult funeral situation you've been in, and how'd you handle it?
Yeah, well, I first want to say that these two could easily be their own weeks. We realize that. But the reason we brought them together, wedding and funerals together, is there's so many similarities when you're thinking about pastoral things around it. So most difficult funeral I've ever done would have to be one of my dearest friends in our church who was a deacon. He was killed in a car crash. A couple years younger than me, left a wife, 5-year-old and 1-year-old. So I'm dealing with my own personal sadness and grief. I'm trying to care for his family in shock over this, and the church, and try to pastor them and my family who was close to this individual. That just created this perfect storm for when I tried to preach his funeral. It was just overwhelming to try to do it. And so I think that's the thing to recognize with it. The funerals that are most difficult oftentimes are that combination of you're feeling the burden of caring for others in it, and you've got your own personal loss and grief. What is unhealthy but tempting to do is for pastors to emotionally check out, not deal with their own grief in it, because they see that they have to care for everybody else. And weddings are a bit different in that way, but there's still similarities with knowing you got to care for others, but also personally engage with it. So what have you found between weddings and funerals? There's similarities to you in those things?
There absolutely are. In one regard, weddings sometimes feel like a party they want to have that they can't really have unless they invite you. So they need a pastor.
That's right.
And so sometimes you're the guy invited to the party because they have to invite you. And it can be difficult to step into that, to do any kind of real ministry, which it is a wonderful opportunity to present the gospel. But sometimes the couple won't necessarily see it that way. And we could talk more about counseling and how you try to walk them through that process. But I've certainly been to weddings where I felt like I was the guy nobody really knew and nobody really wanted there.
You have done your part. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much.
You can go home now.
That's right.
I will say that, full confession time, I would rather do 10 funerals to one wedding. And I say that because, one, the ministry opportunities at funerals, both are great, but weddings are just stressful and exhausting to do. And funerals, if you're going for the sake of just finding a key time to do real ministry, I've said often that the two most important places to seize the moment to do real unique ministry opportunity is the funeral home and the hospital room. And I say that knowing that a lot of younger pastors I'm finding are actually running from those places, or they're sending other people to those places. And so, but I want to advocate for that weddings and funerals are unique places to possibly do ministry that you can't do when life's normal and everything's just great.
It's absolutely right. So on the wedding side, I would say make it about more than just the wedding ceremony,
right,
and really invest in the couple. And I've found that while I say that, I've shown up and felt like the uninvited guest or the guest they had to invite, there have been lots of other circumstances where you really do ministry to that couple, yeah, and then the wedding ceremony becomes a celebration of that. So not all is lost, but the funeral home is the place where really ministry can flourish in even a greater way than that. Yeah. And stepping into spaces like you described where you really knew the person well, but then stepping into some spaces of church, of families that are not quite as connected to your church, but you get the opportunity to preach in that moment, and the ministry that can happen there, and then actually it springs from there. So maybe at the wedding it's beforehand, but at the funeral home sometimes it's a platform for even more ministry in the future to that family.
Yeah, that's well said. And I've probably done 150 funerals of people I didn't know. And I would just encourage pastors, like, one of the best things you can do when you go to a new church, go find the nearest funeral home, introduce yourself, and say, hey, if you need help with somebody, they don't have a pastor, call me, I'm glad to come help. To preach the gospel in a room full of people that are unbelievers, more than likely they don't have a connection to a pastor, and the realness of death is before them. I mean, that's a ministry opportunity only pastors get. And so, and weddings too, I'm with you. I can resonate with, as I look back, some of the most meaningful relationships I have with certain people in the church are people I took through premarital counseling and walked them through some hard, and married them, and now watch them have children and celebrate all those things. So I mean, these are These are key moments that we want to run to and look for, not run away from.
That's right. They will create moments for great stories probably in the future, but more importantly, great ministry.
I dropped the ring twice when they handed it to me. I had to totally change how I handed the rings to everybody. So you got to adjust as things fail and fall, for sure.
Maybe we'll tell that story another time.